Okay, so the first thing that we want to consider, oh, it's so tiny, I'll have to read it to you. The first thing that we want to consider is the layout. I gave you the layout for this comic, which was not totally fair. Each of the boxes are exactly the same size, right? And the only layout choice you got to make was whether or not you did it hot dog style or hamburger style, like whether or not you did it as a landscape or a, what's the other one called? Letter. Portrait. Portrait, thank you. Or you could, did you do it backwards?
I did.
Oh, okay, so you could choose to do it manga style, like Japanese style, which is backwards, right? But normally a comic book artist has like a lot of choices to make when it comes to layout. This is a Calvin and Hobbes comic. It says, well, summer's almost over. It seems, it sure went quick, didn't it? It sure went quick, didn't it? And Calvin says, yep. And then we see him kind of moving through into the distance, and it says, there's never enough time to do all the nothing you want. I thought this was a nice one for Christmas break, too. I feel like it kind of captures how Christmas break feels sometimes. So why do you think that this artist, Bill Larson, did not choose to break up these panels? See how it's all one panel, right? Like all that a panel is just the box that the image appears in. It's all in one panel, and yet Calvin and Hobbes appear 3 times. What's the effect of that, do you think? Ashton?
Maybe he's representing how fast that moment went.
Okay, so it feels like maybe without the break in between each panel, that it goes really fast through the panel. Your eyes can take it in one moment, right? Yeah, keep it.
For some reason, it feels like more present, like this is happening right now instead of like chunks of it. I guess.
Yeah, totally. It almost feels like like you're in that moment more presently. I love the way that you said it, because when you break it up into these 4 moments, right, it becomes very linear. Okay, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But in this case, your eye gets to choose where to go. Some people will go here first. Some people will go here first, right? And because of that, it feels it's got all of the moments being present. I love the way you said that. Yeah, okay.
Visually, it's more smooth because there's kind of like panels using the trees, but like it all comes together.
Excellent observation. You see how they have broken up the events a little bit, but just not with like the like strict panel edges. And so you're saying it creates this kind of flow to the image too. It says, she said, visually smooth, which I really like. Kind of the way time passes when you're on a break. Anybody wake up one of these days over Christmas break and have no idea what day of the week it was? How does that feel? You know, days just sort of flow into each other. Okay, what else do you think you would choose to do this way? Any other choices? Or any other reasons? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Good. We get more of a sense of movement as they're moving down this hill too. Yeah. And maybe so you can visualize sort of like a video. Okay. Yeah, so it kind of goes with this comment too, that it's like a video effect, like it creates the movement in the panel itself. Whereas each panel, if you were to separate these, might feel like a still moment in time. Okay, cool. Let's look at another one. I wish I had my clicker. I don't know where it is. Here is an example. It's kind of the opposite, where the artist has broken up a panel that should be one panel, right? It's one image broken into 2. That first one, maybe cats will take over when we all die. That's a nice thought. I hope we all die. So those first 2 panels, you can squish them together and it creates one image. So what do you think the effect is then? The last one shoved a bunch of things into one panel. What's the effect of breaking it apart then? Keegan?
With the 2 first pictures, it's kind of like he has like a split idea. Like one side of his head is thinking this, and the other is like, oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I love that. And you see how she's not just considering the fact that it's broken up, but she's considering where the break is happening, right? That it's happening right at the cat's head. So it's like he's of 2 minds. I love that. Yeah. Like the thought process, it's almost like there's a ... after each panel where the thought process is moving, you know, slower and slower as the panels get broken up into pieces. Maggie?
I was gonna say the same thing.
Yeah. Why do you think then that he didn't do that with the 3rd panel? He could have stretched that image so it was broken up into 3. Why the new image in the 3rd panel? Yeah?
Because they're more like not like the main capture take over and all
it's like the punchline of the joke too, right? Like the first part could be a really nice idea. Maybe cats will take over when we all die. That's a nice thought. But then the tone changes abruptly. So it makes sense to have a new image where it's like, I hope we all die. Like it moves from like this contemplative, beautiful, slow thing, right? To like a kind of harsh, blunt statement at the end. Yeah.
I think it's kind of like they change the way that the picture is focused on the cat because of the emotion. Because you can sort of like emotion on the cat's face.
Yeah, what would you say the emotion is on the third picture?
Kind of like serious.
Yeah, he does. He looks like a very serious kind of cat. Look at his eyes. Looks like he's plotting. Yeah, Maggie, and this stuff.
So it looks like very simple, but when you think about it, it's a thought that can be broken into different like ways of thinking about it. Like,
yeah.
We have a totally different perspective of what someone else could have. And so like they can go really deep, but it's explained in such a simple way. Yeah.
I really like how this could be from the cat's perspective, or it could be from the owner of the cat's perspective. You know, Zach?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned.
Okay.
Thing. The third panel kind of reveals who the words are from.
Good.
The first you could totally just be like a picture of a cat with someone voicing over it. Everyone's like, oh, this is the cat.
Yeah, because it suddenly changes into the first person at the end, where the cat is like thinking through these things. But before we get there, it could be the owner looking down at their cat, being like, "Oh, how nice it would be if this cat took over the world." But by the end, yeah, that cat seems to be plotting. This seems to be coming from his head. And I think we also get that early on. There's a foreshadowing with what Keegan said. That panel right there in that panel break right in his head shows us this cat could be the one thinking of this. Okay, let's look at another one. So it says, Glassy, Glassy, come here, girl. And then Glassy goes down the stairs. It's kind of dark. I guess I think this is revealing how I like darkness. But do you see how the panels here are at this angle, right? This isn't about breaking it up. It's actually about the shape of the panels. What's important here? Yeah.
It kind of shows like motion. It doesn't show like just like different scenes. It shows like kind of how it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like that downward trajectory, right? And I like how you say it shows like how it's kind of going to happen, because you take in an image all at once. But then, like, so when you look at that bottom panel, right, you almost see shatter first. And so it's almost like you see what's going to happen before it actually happens on the page. Does that make sense? Yeah, Ashley.
I was just gonna say I really like the kid's expression like this. Just like what have I done?
I know. And then the final, yeah, I really like the way they've broken it up. So the first panel is the kid, and the last panel is the kid. And the first panel is the kid enthusiastic and happy, and the last panel is like, oops. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Like it's this is an instance where we're seeing length of duration of time, right? So at the beginning, we see the dog kind of like, oh, I hear someone calling my name, and like standing at the top and like thinking about doing it, you know? And then it goes really fast with those diagonals. Why do you think the diagonals would create that kind of speed? For any reason? Yeah.
Well, the stairs is slanted, so maybe.
Oh, so kind of like how Maggie was saying, it gives it that trajectory, right?
Yeah.
That forward momentum. Yeah. Awesome. Jack?
I feel like maybe it's like the diagonal makes it happen faster because it's like if they were all boxes and your eyes you have to like go across and go down, but like in diagonal your eyes can just go in a straight line and watch it all happen.
Awesome. Yeah, it kind of like your eyes slide. Yeah, like in that diagonal way. I love that. Yeah, Maggie.
And like how it's falling, it's like kind of just shows like it makes it more like easier to like understand. I guess to see like, oh yeah.
Because you fall at that angle, right? So it's a slippery angle that it shows. It's interesting though that it's going the other way. Like we usually read from left to right. We always read from left to right. We read this way, right? So it's interesting that the diagonals are on this upward slant for us as the dog falls downward. Would it have been better to do the diagonals the other way? Yeah?
I think the way the diagonals are placed allows for, I guess, better shape. If you had it following the stairs, you would be able to see it much.
Yeah.
Of
you're keeping in mind that you have to have people to be able to understand it too, right? And the direction that we read is important here. Yeah.
And I feel like all the different directions and stuff that adds like a sense of like chaos.
Yes, it
Like
totally
what's
does.
happening.
Yes, and it does like the way that it breaks apart too. The way that like the image is like the top one is smaller in size, right? It's kind of contained, and then as he shatters, oh, it's so sad. As he shatters and takes up more room, the panel gives him more room for that chaos to unfold. Okay, next one. Okay, so we've thought about layout now. There's a million things we could say about layout. But here's one on perspective. So I'm just curious, when you drew your comics, how many of you guys drew yourself in the comic? Raise your hand. There's an image of you in that comic. How many of you, did anybody draw from a first person perspective? Or you're not in it? Lydia did? Okay, yeah, that can be a way of doing it. So perspective means that we have a few ways of thinking about it, but it's very similar when we think about stories. Who's the narrator of our story, and how do they appear in the comic? And how does the comic establish them as a narrator? So if you look at this one, it says, look, you're a nice, beautiful girl. You'll be fine. It's not that. And she's crying. And he says, come on. And he says, it's that every time I think about it, there could be someone better in this city. Someone amazing, you know, because I'm very special. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm just a special person. It's a really good breakup, I think. I think, fellas, if you need this for some inspiration. So I think this comic establishes some perspective here. Like, we know who's, even though he's in the comic, we know that it comes from this guy's perspective, I think. What helps establish the perspective in this one?
I think it kind of shows that there's a conversation going on. It's not like someone's just talking. It shows pictures. It's like, oh, they're talking to these two people. What they're talking about shows the emotion.
Okay, I really like that. That even though she doesn't say anything in this, the artist has chosen to include her in most of the panels, right? Which shows us that this is a conversation. This isn't just a monologue. Zach.
The angle, we're kind of looking like over his shoulder.
Yeah.
On his side of the.
Yeah, exactly. And it's called over-the-shoulder shot in film. I think we could call it that. In a comic, it's this over-the-shoulder perspective so that we know that we're looking like at her. So it gives us just that little angle, makes us look like we're aligned with him. Yeah, Keegan and then stuff.
I also think in the second slide, since it doesn't show her at all, I
Yeah.
feel like it's more centered around him and like how he's just, I don't know, kind of closed off.
Yes, the way he wants to be, right? The world centered around him. Yeah, it's really important that they chose not to include her in every single panel. They only include her in the 3, and then we have a single panel just with him. Even though the conversation is continuing, we zero in on his point of view. Yeah, yeah.
I think it might actually be from the perspective of the girl.
Oh, okay.
How she's just listening and talk, and like maybe the realization to her face, like at the last panel, she's just like, it's kind of like a movie.
Oh, I like that. So it's us like having to listen to him like we're her. I can kind of see that. Yeah, Ashley.
I was gonna say I like how they did the over the shoulder shot because like they did like maybe like on like the side shot where like
Yeah, they were even.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you would be able to see the girl's expression very well, but like they sort of explain like you know what's going on with her. You don't have to act out.
Yeah, good. So there's kind of there's a kind of cluelessness to our character. I'm still going to say it's from the guy's perspective, but what we're learning is that this guy is kind of clueless because he keeps talking about what a special person he is, even though we continue to see her extreme emotions and how she is reacting to it. Okay, here's another one on perspective. Ugh, this party. Everyone here is awful except me, a sensitive introvert. Ugh, this party. Everyone here is awful except me, a sensitive introvert. Ugh, this party. Everyone here is awful except me, a sensitive introvert. Let me ask this. How does this comic create a story? Yeah.
I think it's funny how like they just sort of explain the introvert's mind. You don't know, like yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's confusing, but I find that.
So these little circles here, we know if we read comics, like even just, you know, comics in the newspaper, that's a thought process, right? So we know we're inside their minds. Yeah, Peyton.
You know, we're all from the same place. It shows like little aspects of each person.
Yes. Absolutely. Did you guys catch that? Like the dress there is the dress that the last lady is wearing. And then there she is in the corner of the middle panel, like they're all in each other's panels, right? So then you get this idea that we're going inside each of their head and it's creating this continuity and that they're all at the same party. Abby?
It also kind of shows like judgment
Yes.
between each other. Like they're all like, oh, like they don't get it. And then they're all thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And why do you think, let's go back to layout. Why do you think this artist didn't choose to put them all in one panel? What's the effect of separating it like this?
To show their different thought processes.
Yeah, and I think you have to show that barrier between their thought processes. Even though their thought processes are exactly the same, you're showing the way that they're isolated within their own little panel, right? Yeah, Zach?
Most are more like a punchline. You have to read each one individually here,
Yes.
and you expect them to be different. Whereas one panel you kind of realize, oh, they all look the same.
Absolutely, and that's how it creates that joke, right? Is forcing you to read it 3 times. Okay, let's do another one. I meant to give you a little bit of warning. This one is, it's cartoonish, but it's a little graphic. If you don't want to look at it, that's okay. We have this guy and he says, I just wanted to see what it looked like. So he cut up a fish. And what I want to point out here is that you're looking from this low angle, right? What kind of effect does that create when you're down here at the bottom? Oh, yeah.
Kind of shows that the guy is overpowering. He's like, oh, look at it when he goes and like,
Yes.
I'm the top human.
Good. So it creates this hierarchy, right, where he's like looming over the fish and he looks overpowering. Yeah, Haley.
And makes you want to say them like holding a knife in his hand.
Yeah. And you see how the knife is closer to us than his head is. So that feels more prominent to us. These kind of shots like this, it makes somebody, when you go from a low angle, this is a movie or in comics, when you go from a low angle, it makes someone take up that entire frame. They look huge. The opposite, when you go from a high angle and someone looks kind of diminished and weak. So he looks really strong. He looks really intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about perspective in that sense too, these angles that we can get through drawing. Oh, Ashton, yeah.
I just want to point out like how his face is sort of black and like that.
Mhm.
I think that's just have like a menacing feel.
It creates these like really creepy looking shadows
Yeah.
that like you can't see his eyes either in the glasses. Yeah.
I feel like look at his knuckles, like they have so much detail on them that makes you look at that first. You're like, oh, something's up.
Yes.
Like, you know.
Yeah, so you look at the hand and the knife like the thing that can do the violence, right? And it's almost like that's more important than whatever's going on in his head, that his head maybe can't control what happens with the hand and the knife, which is huge and detailed and prominent. All right, I also want to look at style. I'm going to have to read this one to you because it's tiny. I didn't mean for that to happen. Maybe I can pull it up here. Lump. Okay, so this is a cartoon called Lump. It says, that's hurtful to label me like that, lump. I'm so much more than a lump. So much more. That's it. That's the whole comic. So when we're thinking about style, we're thinking about the way that the comic actually drew it. So like the lines and the texture and the thickness of the lines, the actual like style he used to draw. I actually don't know if this is a male or female artist. Why do you think that they chose to draw it in this way? It's very minimalist, I think. No shading at all. Yeah, Maggie?
Maybe to look more on the expression of the drawing and not like the words of the drawing, like the other one that was I'm a sensitive introvert. It's more on what they said.
Uh-huh.
And then this one's more like, oh, look what I drew, look at what they're doing.
Okay, good. So the joke becomes way more visual here than verbal too. And it does kind of force us to look at its expression, even though its expression doesn't really change. It's like sometimes a line for a smile and sometimes a little O for a smile, but other than that, it's the same, you know? Zach?
Leave it alone. Like, you don't know. What is that for? What is the lump? What is it made? You don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, why doesn't it matter? Because it's just a lump, right?
Yeah.
Like that's part of the problem is that like he's like, I'm more than just a lump, but by the end of this comic, it's like, no, just a lump, you know? So it has to keep it that simplistic or else it's gonna give it visual interest. And we're gonna start thinking, well, maybe he is more than just a lump, but he's not, and that's the joke. Yeah, Haley and Natasha.
It's maybe it's on like someone's face because of like the line.
Oh, gross. So the texture in this surface is a little bit uncomfortable, I think. It's the kind of hairiness to it is a little uncomfortable. Ashton?
I was gonna say, I think they didn't like put a background have it white because they didn't want to take focus off of that one. They just wanted to
Yeah, good. Good, I agree. Okay, let's look at the next one. I think there's one more, maybe two more. Yeah, just one more. I'm gonna pull this up bigger again. So this one's quite abstract. So it's called Mermaid. It's this person and they're looking out at maybe some water and some rocks, and it says, if I listen carefully, I can hear the river beneath my feet. And if I follow its current, it will take me to where I need to be. So this is more of an artsy-fartsy type comic, you know, no joke in this one. Why do you think they chose this style? You know what, I'm gonna have you talk about this one in pairs. I want you to think about what this comic means and why they would choose to draw it and illustrate it in this style. Okay, talk to each other for a second.
Yeah, it's only like one thought.
Okay. Really like how I done that one. I think. Oh, why? The light? Why do we need light?